Welcome to Nasdaq Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, global markets reporter at Nasdaq. Joining us for this segment, we have Andreas Katsouris. He is the Executive Vice President and Director of Strategic Forecasting over at PredictIt, the stock market for politics. Andreas, it's great to have you with us. Welcome to Trade Talks.
It's great to be back, Jill. Thank you.
You got it. And PredictIt traders, they were pretty on point when we take a look at what they were pricing in regarding Joe Biden's pick for the Fed nominee.
Yeah, thanks for mentioning that, Jill. I wanted just to pat PredictIt and our traders on the back a little bit. The question of who the president would choose or would nominate for the next term at the Federal Reserve has been a big topic of interest, obviously, in the country, and it's been a big topic at PredictIt. And generally, traders, got this one right. We had the choice of Chairman Powell at 70–80%, really quite consistently. So it's nice to see when the crowd is wise and gets some of these important questions pretty accurately.
Yeah, sometimes traders do get it right. Let's move along and talk about Chilean politics. That's one area that we haven't really delved into yet.
No, not at all. And we just had a first round of a pretty divisive election in Chile. This is a very close race between two candidates who are thought to be or described as fairly extreme from one another, one on the right and one on the left. And the market's been pricing this essentially as a toss-up, really through the first round. I think it's 60-40 now in favor of the conservative candidate, who did a little bit better than expected in the first round. But we'll definitely be watching the Chilean election. You might remember the election in Peru next door went down to the wire with two candidates on quite far apart ideologically, and it was quite a difficult post-election aftermath. So hopefully that won't be how things go in Chile, but it'll be a close election. We expect the traders will be pretty interested as we get closer to the second round.
Yeah, let's switch gears and talk about what's happening in Texas. Of course, that's going to be a hotly contested gubernatorial race, as well as we've seen in Virginia, as we've seen in New Jersey.
Absolutely.
They're coming down a little bit more closer to the line than they have in the past.
Yeah, and former Congressman and presidential candidate Beto O'Rourke announced last week that he would be a candidate for the Democratic nomination. That's not really a surprise. Traders have been pricing him at plus 90 cents to win the nomination of the Democratic Party, and for Governor Abbott, similarly, to win the nomination of the Republican Party. So that sort of looks like a two-horse race, except Matthew McConaughey has flirted with running one party or the other or independently, and is getting some traction according to some recent polls. I think he beats both the governor and former congressman head to head. Of course, it won't be a head-to-head election, but there seems to be some ferment and some interest in the Texas race, at least on the polling side. But it's quite interesting that PredictIt as pretty stable numbers. McConaughey's not really making a difference in either nomination, and isn't expected to really contest right now for the governorship, even if he runs as an independent. So maybe much ado about nothing.
Yeah, I spoke about this with another one of your team members last week, but it makes you wonder if perhaps the American population is exhausted with not having career politicians in place to govern, because the running is very different than actually governing and doing the day-to-day business of the government. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out and if it does move the needle. And let's wrap up here a bit on national politics. What are traders at PredictIt focused on this week?
Well, I wanted to touch on the 2024 races for your listeners. I know 2024 seems a long time away, but of course it's just around the corner in politics. And some pretty interesting numbers. I think last time you and I talked about it, former President Trump was considered, essentially level with Florida Governor DeSantis to win the Republican nomination. And those numbers have changed in the last month or two considerably. President Trump is now at sort of 40 cents to win the nomination. I think that's really a question now of whether he decides to run or not. And that's a pretty interesting comparison over on the Democratic side. But that's actually a higher number than Joe Biden's to win the nomination Democratic Party. So it's pretty unusual to see an incumbent president, that low. I think he's trading at 39 cents. Vice President Harris's numbers have slid a bit from about 30 to 25, and Pete Buttigieg, as the transportation secretary, has sort of moved up. So it looks like, there's a lot of time left, a fairly competitive race for both nominations, potentially. But interestingly, when traders turn to the eventual, the outcome of the election, if it's a Trump-Biden head-to-head, we've got numbers of 29-23 in favor of former President Trump. But when we look at the party numbers, it's 50-50. So it's a pretty volatile and pretty interesting races on all sides for the presidency.
All right, Andreas, we appreciate the insight. Thanks for joining us on Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.
Thank you, Jill.